I started on this project about 2 years ago when I was sent the screenplay by Pathé and Abby Morgan. The first thing I thought was, Margaret Thatcher is the most significant female leader this country has had since Elizabeth I. And I've been passionately interested in Elizabeth I and directed both a film and a play about her. And so that was really my entry point. This was not a conventional biopic. And I think the biopic form is very, very tricky to pull off, how to get away from that catalogue of facts. But this immediately was a different beast altogether. And I immediately recognised the brilliant writing, particularly for old Margaret, for whom Abby had created this extraordinary world in the present, which was an act of, pure imagination. I think that it's a really radical piece of writing. I think the beauty of it is in the detail. And I think it's something that both Meryl, myself, and the cinematographer Elliot Davis all shared, which was this passion for the tiny things that maybe other filmmakers might not have concerned themselves with, and perhaps would not be conventionally the territory of a big political film. And that because this is about memory, often my entry point to a scene, or Abby's, or both ours coincidentally, would have been just something small like a button being sewn on, because this is all about memory, and when we remember things, it's often keyed off by a sound, a smell, or something incidental that then we remember, oh my goodness, that was the day when that great world event occurred. Meryl is superhuman, there is no question of it. There were some days where she had to be got out of bed almost the minute she'd got into bed, in the middle of the night, to be put into the makeup for the old lady. And there was one day when we shot the journey from the shops as the old lady, which had to be done at dawn. Then we rushed out of town and we shot her dancing with Ronald Reagan. Then we shot her, we had to then take her from that sort of, she was then, the super Maggie at that point, global superstar. Then we had to go back to the 1970s and get her to do this ice cream scene when honestly, it was one of those, filmmaking is at times just, you are bungee jumping. I mean, no, what's the word? You are, filmmaking is, you just are sometimes, to say busking it is an understatement. I just didn't know what was coming next. And I had this dilemma that the sound couldn't record the scene if the ice cream van was turned on, but we couldn't pull an ice cream unless the machine was on, and if we turned the machine off and tried to pull an ice cream, there was some equation whereby the ice cream van would explode if we didn't have a switch thrown, but if we had that switch thrown, the sound couldn't record. So as Meryl pulled the handle, I was just thinking, oh my God, the whole thing is going to go up. The ice cream van and Meryl are all going to explode. And she went out there and we had to sort of invent the text for that at the very last minute. And I ran into her caravan. I had a piece of paper with, the gist of what we were going to do. I told Ari Neve and Gordon Rees to stage manage the entire thing, just improvise the entire thing. And we had Margaret Thatcher's biographer was playing the managing director of the of of Loveday's ice cream, and it was just one of those, oh my God, this is just, we are sailing so close to the wind here. But because of her, just infinite talents, somehow she makes that into a marvellous little moment. We did a series of tests, camera tests, before we began to shoot. And it was the moment when Meryl came out of the makeup room as old Margaret in costume. And there was some people sitting, I think, waiting for an audition. And she came down the corridor and just, as Mrs. Thatcher, just said good morning to them as she shuffled off down to the studio, and their jaws dropped. On the set, there was one day when I heard one of the actors say, "Close your eyes, she's in the room." And another one said, "Yeah, but open your eyes, she's still in the room." And I think that was what it felt like on the set. The film takes place in the present, over a couple of days when Margaret has finally decided to let go of Dennis's things, his clothes. It's a big day for her, and as she begins to pull together and sort through these things, she's ambushed by her past life. And it's a story of letting go, a story of acceptance and resignation. One's first thought was, crikey, where is this movie coming from? But I immediately saw that it's not a political film. In fact, it's a Shakespearean story of a great leader who is flawed in all kinds of ways, both tremendous and flawed. And it's the story of power and a crash from power, and what happens when someone whose life has been absolutely bursting to fullness with their work is suddenly brought to a crashing end, and the kind of cataclysm that ensues. But in many ways, it's a universal story. It's a mirror of all our lives. It's just that the life she led is so epic, so huge, that it's our own lives writ large, and what will happen to all of us when our careers end, we are incapacitated, facing old age. It was immensely important that the audience fell in love with the young Margaret and the young Dennis and believed that they were this young incarnation of their older selves. And there was something that developed between them. It may be that we had to rehearse the dancing, and dancing is very good for releasing playful jollity between actors. And we did rehearse as well outside the shoot, and there was just the sweetest rapport between them. And I think that Harry has a wonderful warmth, quirkiness, really something that made you believe that he was Dennis Thatcher, he was Jim Broadbent. And on the very last day of the shoot, when most other people had gone home, we went down to Camber Sands thinking it would be kind of raining on a beach in England, and the sun came out. It was like the last day of March, and they played on a beach like a family on holiday in Cornwall, and again something beautiful was established, which when you see the old couple looking back on their Super 8 footage on the television, you see Margaret raking through, looking for the DVD that clearly Carol's had transferred, you know, the old DVDs. There's something incredibly heartbreaking about her trying to hold on to this once completely cohesive family. I visited the House of Commons 3 times before we shot those scenes. Twice on a private visit to go and actually stand in the chamber when it was empty and look around. And then once, Meryl and I went to Prime Minister's Question Time together, which was really exciting. And of course, the Question Time is so different to anything that happens in American politics, and the roaring and the texting that was going on. It is just an amazing piece of theatre. I was determined that our set for the House of Commons be as spectacular as it possibly could be. And so we went to great efforts to recreate the chamber in all its detail in order that we could have that camera movement in the set and really create this sense of the boxing ring, the bear pit of it. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of that Simon Elliott, the production designer, pulled off with not at all a big budget, was the chamber. And when we had our government whips who came to help us sculpt the kind of reactions of the Labour benches and the Tory benches, they walked in, and there were, I think, 4 of them, MPs. They stood in the middle of the chamber and went, "Oh, it's just like arriving at work." And so I thought, well, they're impressed. I hope they're going to be absolutely riveted. And I'm riveted, aside from the assumption of Margaret Thatcher, I think just by the sheer range of the performance, because this isn't just Meryl playing Margaret young and old. This is Meryl playing Margaret before she became Margaret. So there is the Margaret before she had met Gordon Rees and had voice training and had, changed her hair so that the hair became more like, in some way, a sort of, well, it was a little bit like, the equivalent of an Elizabethan ruff or something to give her power and status when she was in a room full of men wearing medals. So the different eras all had their different characters, and then there was the Margaret of the present, which was another thing entirely, for which Meryl really had no reference beyond a few little fragments.